Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host Calvin Timms. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. And today I'm very excited because I'm going to be going through a roster analysis, breaking down a team that was sent in to me by one of the listeners, asked me to give him my opinions on what he could do in this league. So it's a very good team, and I'm excited to do this because it gives you guys an insight into my mindset and how to analyze your own teams. And, as an engineer, I like to be more analytical at times, not all the time, but, I like to think things through on a deeper level, and that's kind of what you got to do with a lot of these rosters. So hopefully you guys are excited for this today. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the content we've been pumping out. It's going to probably slow down a little bit after the NFL draft, but we're going to just keep rolling with 4 episodes a week up until then. If you can, tell the podcast to one of your friends, just trying to really get the podcast out there to more people. So, been really hammering in, grinding it in. So if you guys can, just help us out there and tell the podcast to one of your friends out there. And if you can, while you're over on YouTube, Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you're listening to the podcast, if you can, leave a like, comment, subscription, review, anything you can, just to help with the algorithm to get it out to more people as well. And, subscribe to the video as well. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but, and I guess the bell doesn't always work. So you got to really make sure you ring it. I don't know how the bell stuff works. I'm just a noob on YouTube. So let me know if it works or not. But here is the roster that we're going to be breaking down today. So if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see the breakdown, all of the kind of the rules, the roster construction, everything like that. If you are listening, I will try to, break it all down for you, but I can't promise that I'll hit everything. So this is a plug to go check out the YouTube channel, but like I said, I'll try and break it down for everybody here. So the league is a 12-team Superflex league. It has, let me see here. So it has 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, 1 tight end starter, 3 flex, super flex, and it's a 2.0 tight end premium. So this is a deep roster already, just looking at that. I mean, you have to have 2 quarterbacks pretty much every single week. You have to have 3 wide receivers and 3 flex. And with it being 2-point tight end premium, I know a lot of people are not used to tight end premium in the first place, and then you add in, an extra half point for the tight ends. It's not that bad, it doesn't make them that overpowered or broken for fantasy football. You make it 2.0 tight end premium, and these guys routinely, not even the good elite guys, those guys are broken. They're just absolutely broken. I mean, for example, if I just go and look last year for the 2022 season, just in terms of points that were scored, Travis Kelce was the number 1 player. He was the number 6 player scored in points in this league. It's just absolutely crazy. Third player, if I sort this correctly, came up as the 6th player when you pull up the stats, but he was the number 3 player in fantasy football last year because of the 2-point tight end premium. Now, again, Travis Kelce is an outlier, right? He's the elite of the elite, but, even the mid-tier tight ends are just absolutely bonkers in leagues like this. George Kittle was the number 30 overall player. That's with quarterbacks in this, and it's a 6-point quarterback league, so 6-point passing touchdown league. So, tight ends are very valuable for this league. I just want to emphasize that as we start getting into the roster construction. Now, that said, for this team, quarterback-wise, I did not list every single player that this roster has. I'm trying to eliminate some of the roster cloggers at the bottom of the roster, the Davis Mills, the Keontae Harris for the Patriots, those type of players. So I only really noted the guys that are valuable and, dynasty worthy, I guess, at this point in time. So at quarterback, he's got Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, and Brock Purdy. At running back, he's really kind of thin here. He's got Breece Hall, Javonte Williams, A.J. Dillon, and Gus Edwards. And those last two are not very exciting names whatsoever. At wide receiver, this is where it really jumps up. And I do like his quarterbacks as well. You know, if Brock Purdy gets that starter's job, he's got 3 guys. It's a little bit of a risk, but he's still got Lamar Jackson and Trevor Lawrence. So in the super flex, he's got 2 studly top 12 guys, which I do love that right there. Wide receiver, he's got Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, the number 1 and number 2 dynasty wide receivers. Does not hurt to have those 2 guys there. Definitely a strength. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Rashad Bateman, Nico Collins, John Mechie, and I think he has like Jalen Tolbert as well. Tolbert much less relevant now that they added Brandon Cooks to this team, so I didn't really think to write him down here, but just another guy that he does have in terms of depth. Tight end, he's really got a lot of guys, but not very many useful guys. Like Daniel Bellinger was somebody until they brought in Darren Waller. Trey McBride, though, David Njoku at the top. Trey McBride should have a very solid season ahead of him. Noah Fant with Seattle, what could have been, I just don't know what to think about Noah Fant. He is such a talented player, but it just did not work out with Seattle. Seattle loves to rotate their tight ends, like goodness gracious. They run 3 tight ends. Like it's crazy how many tight end snaps go to multiple tight ends every single game. Just play like 2 guys. I don't understand what we're doing here. I don't know why 4 tight ends need to have 30% of the snap share every single game. So yeah, it's pretty crazy there. Draft capital, though, he does have some decent draft picks. He's got the 1-3, 110, 210, a third, couple fourths, a fifth. He's got all of his picks for next year. So when you look at this roster, my initial thoughts here are, when you look at the quarterback, again, he's got 2.5 roughly quarterbacks, depending on Purdy. Lamar is a proven guy. Trevor Lawrence is establishing into a dependable, proven guy. I think he's going to take another step forward this year. Purdy's a question mark. If Trey Lance does keep this job, he doesn't get traded, and he wins the job, Brock Purdy's just a backup. So, he's a very good backup. He's a valuable backup, but he would not be able to contribute regularly for fantasy football purposes, right? So, you need another guy here just as a backup plan in case, Lamar Jackson gets injured again. This roster could be really hurting in a super flex league playoffs. So with those picks, we'll get into those here in a minute, what the strategy would be for those. At running back, Breece and Javonte, but no real depth behind them. A.J. Dillon is okay for depth, but after that, Gus Edwards is the most notable name. There's really not much there. He definitely needs at least one other guy because there's a real chance that Javonte is like J.K. Dobbins and isn't healthy until, around week 10 to 14. Breece Hall is on the right track to supposedly start week 1, but there is a risk that he doesn't have Breece Hall either. There is the risk that Breece Hall will not be healthy until, week 2, 3, 4 into the season. I don't anticipate that at this point in time based on everything we've heard. But, when it comes to injuries, you just never know how those are going to play out months into the future. So I don't want to say that Breece is a lock. I feel like he is. But if you don't have Javonte Williams and you don't have Breece Hall, you're left with A.J. Dillon and really nothing else behind him. Wide receiver, very, very solid. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Deontay Johnson, and George Pickens. One of those 2 guys should be fantasy relevant. Bateman, I still believe in. Michael Thomas is another guy. I forgot he had this. I forgot to write it down. Sorry, I wrote it in my notes here. But Michael Thomas, if he can do something, I'm not counting on Michael Thomas. I think that's probably why I didn't write him down when I was breaking down the roster here. Mechie and Collins, if they can develop with a young quarterback, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, one of these guys, it's not a given, and it's anticipated that they're going to take another wide receiver early in the draft. So you don't really have anything much there, but with a 3 wide receiver league, you should definitely be able to get value out of Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and one of Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. But you still have the 3 flex you have to fill as well. Now, when fully healthy, Breece Hall and Javonte would be taking your 2 running back slots, but you just do not really have the depth for the last 1 to 2 flex spots for this roster, in my opinion. Now, tight end, he's probably good enough, unless you have one of the top 6 guys, Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts, Kittle, Waller, or TJ Hawkinson. they're all really expensive in a league like this where it's 2-point tight end premium because they all have very high volume, right? That's what makes them, well, like minus Pitts, I guess. He's a very high percentage of the target share, but there's not many targets going around. Now, we'll see what they do with Desmond Ridder going into 2023. I think they're going to try and pass a little bit more this upcoming year. I think for whatever reason, Arthur Smith did not believe in Marcus Mariota's ability to throw the ball. So that really limited their passing opportunities every single game. I don't think that's going to be his ideal career. That's not what he did his first year with Matt Ryan. So I don't know why everyone is thinking that, with Desmond Ridder, he's never going to throw the ball. He has run a game plan where it's a pass-heavy system. It's just he did not trust Marcus Mariota. So that, I think Pitts is in line for a positive regression in targets, but an overall volume, but I could be wrong there. We'll see what this year holds. Regardless, unless you're going to pay up for one of those top 6 guys, and again, they're very, very expensive, he's not going to be much worse off than most other teams. I mean, those guys are 6 guys. There's 12 teams here, so that means half the league does not have one of those elite tight ends. David Njoku, when he was healthy last year, was killing it with all the volume that he was able to get, and I don't see that changing. They paid him a lot of money to be here, and then if Trey McBride can take a step forward like I anticipate him to with a Hopkins trade, and it looks like Kyler Murray might be healthier to start the season than everybody is kind of anticipating, that could lead to a massive opportunity for Trey McBride early on in the season. So there is some potential there, but Noah Fant is an okay flex 3 here, but you don't really love to lean on that there. So you need a couple more guys here in terms of depth. So my recommendation for this roster would be to move at least the 110 for an established running back. At this point in time, we have no idea what these rookies are going to be able to do. And by established running back, I mean a guy that is basically secured and locked and loaded and not really at risk of losing his job. You know what I mean? The type of guys that you're not anticipating. Like if I could go and send the 110 for DeAndre Swift, for example, that's something that I would at least consider. I think DeAndre Swift is being undervalued versus what his upside can be. I understand, there's the competition with David Montgomery. Maybe you can even send you go and get David Montgomery for the 110 if you're that worried about Swift. But one of those 2 guys, how much Detroit wants to run the ball there. A Jamal Williams, for example, would not cost a first round. Maybe the 210 would be able to get you Jamal Williams. But him in New Orleans with a probably Kamara suspension coming down the pipe, it's very interesting there. And then another guy to look at would be Samaje Perine. These guys are established running backs where you know what you're going to be able to get from these guys. They're not elite, but they're not the most top tier players as well. Now, if you wanted to go for a more elite option, you could try and get someone like a Jonathan Taylor. There's a team in this league that I saw. One trade that I was considering for this roster would be to send like the 1-3 and Rashad Bateman for like a Jonathan Taylor and a Mike Williams. That would be very interesting because Mike Williams still has a couple more years left in the tank. He's kind of boom or bust. When he plays, he's very, very good, but he's banged up a lot. But with this roster, you already have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. You just kind of need that guy that you can plug into your wide receiver 3 spot. And if you have Mike Williams to plug into that spot, holy cow, you're going to be scoring a ton of points. And then if you can buy Jonathan Taylor with that 1-3 because the owner of Jonathan Taylor is looking to get younger or something like that, that would be something that I'd be considering. Jonathan Taylor does have a little bit, he's being undervalued a little bit right now in Dynasty Leagues. He's a little bit older, but very established, and he's a top-tier player. Now, maybe that's not enough to get that trade done, but that's just kind of a starting point as where I would be reaching out to and seeing how close I could get. Jonathan Taylor, we just went over our running back rankings earlier this week, so, you can go and check those out. But there's a few other, maybe even an Austin Eckler. I don't think I'd be giving the 1-3 for Austin Eckler, regardless of the fact that he would probably be worth it. I just don't think that's something that would interest me personally. Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris, if you're sending out the 1-3 for one of these running backs, you might be able to get a depth quarterback as well, a quarterback 3 for this roster. You don't really need a starter. Again, you have 2 solid guys there, but if you're going to sell the 1-3, I would definitely be trying to get a very good quality running back, and then maybe even a small piece on the back end, like a quarterback to plug in if needed, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, for example. Just getting that added on to a Josh Jacobs, and then all of a sudden you're filling 2 of the biggest needs for this team. So my priority list for this team would be as follows. You got to get a running back. You need at least 2 for this team. Because of the Javonte Williams injury, I would probably be trying to sell him. You're not going to be able to utilize him basically this entire season, and you're just holding the bag. Find someone who still believes in Javonte and offload him for a good return if you can. There's probably guys that are willing to spend on him just because they're in rebuild, and willing to kind of kick the can down the road another year when Javonte could be fully healthy. He's only 22 years old, so he's very young. I just think that with this roster, with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, the quarterbacks, going for the title would definitely be a possibility. When you have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase already, you have a massive advantage there. Breece Hall, if he returns to form at what he was able to do last year, oh my gosh, this team is just 1 or 2 pieces away from just slamming, right? So go and get a running back, a solid running back. Hopefully Breece Hall is healthy for week 1. You get a Jonathan Taylor, somebody of that nature, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris, somebody like that, and this team will be solid. It will be rock solid. Again, if you don't want to go and get one of those top tier guys, maybe you can go get a running back 2, a David Montgomery, a Jamal Williams, a Nick Chubb, for example. I think Nick Chubb is somebody that's going cheaper than his value right now, and that would be the number 1 priority. You need another guy here, especially early on in the season. If you hold on to Javonte, you decide not to sell him, then that's where come a playoff run, you might be okay. But even J.K. Dobbins at the end of the last year, he had some setbacks going into the season. It's almost a guarantee that Javonte Williams is going to have hamstring injuries. They always do in the first year back. So they could shut him down the entire season. It's very, very possible that they just don't want to risk him long term by getting him injured. And, if he gets shut down this year, he's down 2 years now in his development, and he'd be going into the final year of his contract. And that's where I think they'd really try to get the most out of him. They want to save him for that final season to either run him into the dirt or, see what he has left in the tank there. So I'd be selling Javonte. I think you can get a good return on him. You can fill quite a few holes that you have in this roster right now, but I would also my number 2 priority would be getting a third quarterback for depth. Again, you don't need somebody amazing, but if Purdy doesn't win the job, you cannot get screwed over by Lamar Jackson getting injured again. That just is going to be detrimental to this team. So you just need a guy, again, like a Jimmy Garoppolo type of player who you can plug in a pinch, and maybe not Jimmy Garoppolo because he's also probably going to be injured by the end of the year. I just don't think that this team needs a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young at the number 3 slot. I just think that's a little overkill for what this team actually needs. Those guys, 1, you're going to be waiting on them to develop, and 2, you're probably never going to play them, all things considered, for at least a year. So you're just kind of wasting that pick there. I'd be trying to move that pick for a solid, established difference maker at one of the other positions. My number 3 priority would be getting a wide receiver upgrade. Just, I like the depth that he has here. Rashad Bateman, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. If Michael Thomas can come back to being anything for fantasy, that could be great. But I think getting an upgrade like a Mike Williams, for example, would just make this strength even stronger. It would just give him such a good weekly advantage that it would be otherworldly, right? You already have a good advantage with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. make it a just slam dunk by adding a third guy here. And it lets you play someone like a Rashad Bateman, for example, in your flex because you need a little bit more depth there. Maybe you give the 1-3 for a top tier. JSN at the 1-3, again, I just feel like the value is not there for that. If you could trade back and get a lower pick, the 1-5, 1-6, that's where I'd be all over Jackson Smith and Jigba as the number 3 guy for this team. But at 3, I feel like the quarterback value is just too much. It's just too valuable to take one of those top tier quarterbacks versus the wide receiver. I could be wrong here, but either I'd be going JSN with that number 3 pick, or I'd be trying to get, again, the running back, as I mentioned before. And then the 4th priority, there's a pretty big drop in the potentials here, but upgrading to a top tier tight end would be something I'd consider as well. Again, those difference makers are expensive, so maybe you go and spend that 1-3 on like a TJ Hawkinson, for example, or a Mark Andrews or something like that. I don't think that you'd want to invest in one of the rookie tight ends, the Dalton Kincaids or the Michael Mayers, just because you're going to have to wait a year for them to really have value. I mean, look at Trey McBride, for example. He was, I think, the number 1 drafted tight end last year. You got no fantasy value from him whatsoever. Greg Dulcich was probably the most fantasy relevant, and he didn't really carry you in a fantasy perspective, even in 2-point tight end premium. He was too inconsistent there. So at minimum, I'd be looking to move those picks for established players. If you want to keep the 1-3, again, and take like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, that's not the worst case scenario here. I would probably be using the 1-3 for a running back, maybe the 1-10 for the wide receiver upgrade, because that's where you're going to be looking in the draft for most of those wide receivers anyway. The Jordan Addisons, the Quentin Johnstons, those type of players. And I like these guys a lot, but it is a weaker wide receiver class. You're not guaranteed that they're all going to make it. They're all very small. And I heard the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast today broke out the amazing stat of if they're 190 pounds or less, it's very detrimental for their fantasy production. And pretty much this entire class, minus just a couple guys, is under 190 pounds, except for a few names at the top there. And I just think that it's too risky, and I'd be trying to use the 110 for a solidified wide receiver, a Brandon Ayuk, for example, or somebody along those lines, as just a Hollywood Brown, somebody like that, who is younger. You don't have to mortgage the entire future and get like an older guy like a Devontae Adams as your number 3 guy. You can still have a valuable upgrade for the 110 while still having a longevity aspect that you're leaning into for the dynasty aspect as well. The last thing I would be considering as well, you could do this. It's not necessarily the most needed thing to do, but he does have his 2024 first round pick. It's a good class next year, don't get me wrong. But selling that to go and get maybe you package that with the 110 to get an upgrade. Maybe you get 2 guys with that, a Jonathan Taylor and, again, like a Mike Williams or something like that. You can pair multiple picks together and go get those guys. I'd be looking to potentially move that 2024 first. It's not going to be able to help you win next year. You want to win now. You don't want a 2024 first round pick is great on paper, but it doesn't help you win now. It helps you win later, right? And that's kind of the whole point of it. It's going to be a late round pick anyway if you do go deep into the playoffs. So why hold on to it, right? Use that to better your roster. Again, you don't have to get the oldest guys out there, but you can get a Hollywood Brown, some of these younger players. Maybe you combine it with something to go get like a T. Higgins or, some of these other top tier wide receivers, a Garrett Wilson or, Chris Olave, something like that. Go and get one of those type of players and just upgrade that number 3 slot. You get youth on it. And yeah, I think that's where you could have a massive advantage. The number 1 guy I'd probably be targeting would be like a Tyreek Hill. He's kind of the perfect mix. When he's going to retire. You have 3 seasons of Tyreek Hill left, unless there's a catastrophic injury. 3 years to pay out the nose to go and get him is worth it, in my opinion. And it gives you a massive upgrade at wide receiver. So, maybe a Tyreek Hill, maybe the owner saw the news and most people don't think about it. 3 years, that's plenty of time. I'll just play him out and just cash in for 3 more seasons. But a lot of people don't think about it that way. They say, oh, no, I only have 3 years left. Like, okay, all right, what are we doing here? So that's my thoughts on this roster and my thought process and how I kind of analyze these teams. Again, my whole point when I started this podcast was to help other people out there learn how to analyze rosters and look at their rosters with more than just the superficial, I've got the number 1 and number 8 wide receiver, so I'm very good at wide receiver. It's like there's more that goes into it. There's more context, right? He's got very good running backs, Breece Hall and Javonte Williams, but they might not be worth it this year because they might not be healthy to start the season. And if you're not having them until the playoff push with Javonte more than Breece, that's very, very bad. So, it's not going to help you to have on paper 2 top 12 running backs when you can't use one for most of this upcoming season. So that's my thought process. This is how I kind of look at it. If you're interested in having me fix your franchise, hit me up on Twitter and on YouTube, and I'd be happy to give you my advice on that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, let me know your thoughts again on the video. Hit me up on Twitter in the DMs, and I'd be happy to give anybody out there advice. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. If you like this kind of content, let me know. Let me hear about it. Again, one last time, tell the podcast to one of your friends just trying to grow this up until the NFL draft. If there's anything that you'd like to hear us talk about, let me know that as well. We're going to be continuing the rankings next week with the wide receivers. We're going to be coming out with our top 12 Dynasty wide receiver rankings, me and my co-host Dale. He'll be back next week. So until then, thank you guys for joining us tonight, and have a good night.